but I mean, how was it?
Yeah, look, I'm going to try to keep it short. I'll just share that in my post-flight medical debrief when we went over if I had any medical concerns. My only complaint was mild cheek soreness from just having a grin across my face for every phase of flight. It was just, I don't yet have the words, but I'm hoping they'll come soon.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience, and in many ways very different than I expected, which is part of the human experience. But I have to tell you, when I first started my scientific career, I started flying suborbital sounding rockets not far from here at White Sands. And one of the most touching moments for me was to look back on the place where I got my career start from space, after having basically ridden the next generation of suborbital vehicles myself. It was amazing.
I mean, I've had the privilege also of spending, certainly time with you both this week, but, also, I mean, this has been a long journey getting to this point. And I've heard a lot around just the importance of what research on suborbital craft, like what we've done today, what that means for scientific discovery. And so I know you're both here representing different organizations, but, I mean, Alan, maybe starting with you, I mean, what does this really mean to the future of sort of scientific discovery, but also for SWIRI, which is, of course, who you are here representing today?
Yeah, well, let me take your points in the opposite order. For Southwest researchers, SWIRI, Southwest Research Institute, this is very important for us because we're now in a much more competitive position relative to our peers in this new industry of commercial human spaceflight. And we're going to continue to capitalize on that, so keep your eye out. But the importance of this kind of activity that Kelly and I are pioneering in research can't be underestimated. And also there's education. I think a lot of educators are going to be able to fly. I think it's going to be very powerful for STEM education. But I'll just make 2 points quickly about why this is so important. One is that the new commercial vehicles, such as the Virgin rocket ship that we just flew on, fly at 10 times lower costs, and they fly presently about 10 times more often, and soon 100 times, and then soon many hundred times more frequently. So it's opening up access in a way that we never could afford to do or had the capacity to do, all the way back to the 1950s when rocket-borne research was really getting underway. The other thing that's happening here, and I think it will happen on orbit too, is that now the scientists can come and do the experiment the right way. Scientists volcanologists go to volcanoes, astronomers go to observatories, oceanographers go in the ocean. Space scientists have been going to control rooms. And that's not the best way to do your experiment because automating things is expensive and it's error prone, lots of failure modes. And when people are there on the spot, you can drop the costs and you can raise the probability of success. And we're just at the leading edge of that. It's going to be really transformative all the way across the 21st century and probably forever.
Yeah, I'll echo that for IIAS, the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences, whose research I was representing today. And I've crossed 100 parabolas in my microgravity career here on Earth in parabolic flight. But in the very first block of time today in space, that was our sort of micro-G adaptation time, I already exceeded the science objectives that we had gotten here on Earth from parabolic flight. And it was just, I knew, because I was grinning seeing it, I knew Aaron and our payload team was down in mission control watching the same thing, and I knew they were grinning seeing what our payload was doing. And it's just, it's a new era of access to space for scientists, for civilians, and the returns are not yet quantifiable, and that's incredibly exciting.
Do we have any questions here in the front?
So, Alan, you said that it was very different from what you expected. So obviously you can only expect so much with space, but I'm curious to have you expand on that. And then you also, Kelly, was it what you expected? Was it different?
Yeah, and this is an early reaction. I'm sure I'll process it more. I thought that the boost or the ascent and the entry, which are the parts of the flight where there's physical exertion, were much easier than I expected, dramatically easier. We overtrained, and that's a good thing, but it really was a walk in the park. It was I could have done it asleep. The microgravity part, I had a question, I actually put in one of my blogs in the last week or so, that I was curious whether the time would really slow down and dilate, or whether it would just go by in the blink of an eye. It was much closer to the latter. Things went really fast. There were a couple of surprises along the way. We were told that the ship would be firing the reaction control jets, but we heard that a lot, and we saw the ship moving around us in microgravity to a greater extent than I had expected. And I'm going to take that forward to my next flight on Virgin, hopefully about this time next year, and be able to do an even better job.
And I had a slightly different experience in the beginning when I was focused on my payload. My version of time dilation, I don't think I have ever been that focused on a task. The last time I was probably in labor giving birth, I was counting every second that stretched on. But I will say, you know, one of the benefits of flying in a pilot-flown spacecraft like this was the optimization that was given to us as researchers on this flight. And I mean, Kelly and Such, we had some novel calls for this flight from the pilots that, you know, wouldn't normally be necessary in a different type of flight. But one of them that I was looking out for and that was critical for me was the call of stable. And that's as soon as there is no more acceleration happening on the vehicle, the thrusters are off, the, you know, pilots are giving me that absolute pure microgravity stable time while the vehicle is parked to get the absolute purest free float that I could of the payload. And that was a culmination of the entire Virgin Galactic team coming together to figure out how can we safely get this science. You know, it's a novel thing to do human-tended research and free float something in a cabin like this. So kudos to the team and to the pilots and to Colin in particular, because once again, he had a different job than he normally would have as an astronaut instructor. He was giving us time call-outs for Alan and I to really make sure we were meticulously able to calculate where in flight we are and what we needed to do at each point, because obviously for safety reasons I need to stow that payload and secure it so it doesn't, you know, bump around the cabin or interfere with anyone else. But just hats off. I'm so impressed with the Galactic team, and similar to Swery, we at IIS are looking so forward to flying again.
So before we come to another question, if we have one here, so get one ready. Carolyn Peterson, who you know, Alan, from University Today, she actually had to leave early, so I've got some questions that she left. I've got them for both of you. So going to you first, Alan. Carolyn was asking, you know, the camera that you were practicing with today, was that the same one that flew on the shuttle? And then second, what's the sort of class of image that will be observed in suborbital flight on future missions?
Yeah, those are good questions that Carolyn asks. What we carried today was a mock-up of the camera that will fly on the next flight. This was really a training mission. I don't know how many other people have been sent to space truly to train and learn the experience, but this is part of the new era, is that it's affordable enough that you can do that. And I'm going to recommend my colleagues in funding agencies like NASA that they give training flights to people who they expect to get the goods, because you learn so much doing it yourself. For Carolyn's answer, the camera which we'll fly on the next flight is the same piece of hardware that flew on the space shuttle, not a copy of it, but the one that we use on the shuttle on 7 flights to do astronomy and some other things. And her second question was?
It was around what class of image will be observed in suborbital flight.
Well, it depends. This particular camera is put crudely, it's got big pixels. So it's not built to give you this kind of high resolution that you can get from suborbital flights. This one's really to prove that the Virgin spacecraft, to prove how good it is along the spectrum from good to great for doing astronomy. And we'll fly much more sophisticated instruments after this instrument for the test mission. Yeah.
And then, Kelly, I think just for the astroskin that you were wearing today, Carolyn was just asking, is that a different one to that has flown previously? And can you talk just a little bit about what you were measuring wearing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So no, the astroskin unit I was wearing is the identical unit that is flown currently on the International Space Station. What was novel about today's flight is that I was able to wear it during the launch, re-entry, and landing portions of flight, whereas normally astronauts put it on once they're already in a microgravity environment. And so it's measuring pretty much all of the things you would expect. It's like free lead ECG, it's got pulse oximetry, and through a number of different sensor data, we're able to get physical exertion levels, stress levels, you know, things like that. So that's really exciting. I think I was really calm today. I was just like soaking it in. So I'm actually looking I looked last night because I've been wearing the AstroScan all day, and I can see in training every time we were in the sim and we hit release, 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 fire, fire, I looked at my data and I'm like spiking. But when it actually happened today, I'll be so interested to go back when I get a chance and look at the data, because I just felt in the zone and I felt calm and excited, and yeah, I'm looking forward to reviewing it.
I can speak really loud too, since the mic's kind of crazy. That actually leads to my next question, which is, how did the research gathering go for both of you?
Oh my God, it exceeded our expectations. It was so. I'm just looking at Aaron because the payload that we flew, one of them also has shuttle heritage. When it was flown on shuttle, because of like cost prohibitiveness, it was bolted down on shuttle. It wasn't human tended, and the G jitter really disrupted the data, and that was like, the one chance to try to see how the fluid would behave. What we saw today was extraordinary, and I won't take all of our time here, but if anyone's interested after, I'd love to also make Aaron available. But it was amazing. We exceeded anything that we have seen in parabolic flight here on Earth immediately in my first block of time. So the entirety of clear to unstrap through Apogee, we were collecting the highest quality data and watching some really kind of novel behavior from the fluid cell, and being able to react to that in real time and follow it. It was amazing, and kudos to the payload integration team here. It's just epic.
Yeah, when we set the objectives for this flight for Southwest Research, there were 8 objectives, and some were core, what we would call minimum mission success, and then accomplishing all 8 we call full mission success. And we got everything we wanted. All 8 were fully accomplished. And I was talking to Kelly, even while we were just after landing. She got everything too. So you got 2 rookies, 2.5 minutes apiece to get it done, and we were both batting 1,000, which is just great because we really had very ambitious plans that had both the cake and the icing, and we got it all.
Yes.
Oh, another question.
Did you guys get a chance to see the Earth? And if so, what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I'll admit I was so stressed about getting the data that the team was counting on me to get that I don't know that I even sort of looked out until I had gotten all of the data. I knew it was there, but I wasn't paying enough attention. And then once I stowed it and I knew the cabin was secure, I turned around and disrupted everyone's experience in the cabin because I just said, oh my God, so loud, and really took a moment to recognize that this wasn't a laboratory environment, like you might expect on Earth, and we were really in space. And it wasn't until I had stowed that payload that I took that in, and then I waited until I got back to cry, but it was really special.
I did get a chance to look at the Earth a number of times. You might have noticed that camera is pretty big, and my job is to put it in each of 3 different windows. And you'd think that'd give you a bunch of time to look at the Earth, but really the camera takes up half the window. Mm-hmm. And so you're really not getting the kind of view that, for example, Ketty was getting by just putting her face in the window and soaking it up. Now, I did finish all the objectives and the secondary objectives in time to get a little face time towards the end. For any of you that want to be journalists in space, you're going to love this. It's amazing.
Do we have any more questions here?
Jeff Blumenfeld, Expedition News. How did the experience of weightlessness compare to the Vomit Comet you've been on to this?
Well, the big difference is that when you fly on a parabolic aircraft, you typically get between 15 and 25 seconds at a go, right? And to have 3 minutes almost uninterrupted is just an order of magnitude longer, and you notice that. The thing that, and when you fly on a parabolic aircraft, they jostle around a little bit. But this spacecraft is firing jets and changing attitudes and so forth, and that is something that has to be really thought through for microgravity researchers. But even for folks that are doing other kinds of work like I was, it was a bigger distraction than I expected. And that's why I think training flights will get people to proficiency better than just trying to give it a whirl on your first try, particularly when dozens of researchers or hundreds of researchers are flying every year. And I'm looking down the road, maybe it's the 2030s by that point, but it's not that far off.
I agree. I think it was, the continuous nature of it made it a much more pure and stable microgravity experience. During parabolic flight, when you're operating research, you still have all of that acceleration imparted. It's a very dynamic sort of parabola that's happening. So if you're free floating something, it's moving at, whether it's across the cabin at some rate that's predictable. But here, when I released it, it was right in front of me, and I was expecting to have to babysit it and quarterback it a little more than I had to. It was very, very controlled. I will say, though, that for researchers operating, it was critical to have microgravity experience, because that enabled me to not waste a second of time, to situate yourself, to use two hands during a dynamic portion of flight, to unstow a payload, to get it ready, to operate it, to release it, and then to restow it in a secure fashion. We've practiced it hundreds and hundreds of times for that one perfect lap that we did, and so that it was all worth it to make sure that we didn't mess it up.
We'll come back to another question in the audience, but I mean, you're both huge champions for researchers that will frankly, hopefully follow in your footsteps. I mean, is there any advice that you would want to impart on them who will have seen you do this today, and how do they get started on thinking about taking this kind of journey with their research?
Yeah, I mean, you're teeing me up too perfectly for a plug for IIAS. I would say, get involved with our research institute. That was my introduction to bioastronautics research, and this is, the path that it opened up for me. And this is the first of many to come, but I think, it's really happening, and I think something I took to heart were so many messages. It wasn't just about me flying. Like, that's not mission success for me. Mission success will be accomplished once our next researcher flies, and it shows that this is really a pipeline that is opening up, and not just a one-off that we happened to pull off. So that's really what I'm going to be looking for, and I know what we're going to accomplish.
Yeah, my advice to researchers is twofold. One, this is the starting gate, and now it's time to start thinking about proposals. Whoever, whether it's within your corporation or your university, or whether you're going to a federal government agency, or you're a foreigner and you're using your domestic resources somehow. Now is the time to start using your imagination as to how you can do things with a researcher in the loop in these low-cost flight modes that you never had before. But the other advice directly to researchers, and I'll repeat this a lot in technical meetings over the next year, is you really need to get experience to do this well. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of distraction factors. The Earth's a distraction factor. What's going on in the cockpit is a distraction factor. The other experimenters around you are a distraction factor. There's zero gravity. There are jets firing. Get experience in zero G. Get experience in the centrifuge, so the ascent under 4 Gs is like nothing. But that comes from getting experience, and do a lot of things that are in a compressed time environment. So this is not new to you, and you'll accomplish your objectives fully. That takes practice, as Kelly said, and that's the best advice I could give.
And I'm gonna make just one comment and reflection, is that, it was such an honor to fly with Alan in particular on this flight, because when I started my career in the commercial space industry, I started at CSF, the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. I was working with Sarisha, working with Alan, working with Mike L.A., who's here. And this was the vision. This is what attracted me to this industry. Not even thinking, one day I personally will fly, but thinking one day we're going to get to a point where commercial human spaceflight is accessible to researchers and civilians, and it is worth working on the regulatory reform necessary to make that possible. And today is that day, and I just couldn't have asked for a better and more inspiring crewmate. So I'm really grateful.
Thank you.
Do we have another question in the audience?
For both Ellen and Kelly, congratulations on your flight today. A little bit different question. Who or what inspired you in your youth to do space flight? And what would you recommend that we have in our curriculum in our schools now to encourage, kids in middle school or even younger to, to follow behind you?
Well, I was inspired by the heroes of Apollo, not just the astronauts, but the people that put that whole program together. It was really, Apollo really was the 21st century happening 50 years early. It was completely, it's hard to describe now how futuristic it was that was happening. And I just want to get on board that train and be any part of space exploration that I could manage to be a part of. What was the second part of your question, Joe?
For current students.
Oh, what
how
would I say?
What would you recommend that needs to be in the curriculum that's not there
Well,
now?
I would recommend that school systems start flying educators. There's no reason that big school districts like the Dallas Independent School District, the New York City school districts, pick your favorite city, they can afford to send teachers who then become ambassadors, who can go into the classroom, talk about their own space flight. That has a direct impact as role models for STEM education. More than people like ourselves who want to go out and do that, but we're not, to those kids, we're not their local teacher, right? When the kids see that this is possible, they'll want to study math, they'll want to study all the STEM skills. And we need that to power our economy because it's a tech economy. So I recommend that educators start flying and filling up all the seats that they can on all of the accessible forms of commercial human transportation.
Yeah, and I'll just add on representation to that. I think I look at the generational differences between my mom's generation, where human beings hadn't yet been to space, and when she was growing up, women weren't yet eligible. Fast forward one generation, my mom just watched me fly to space, and my daughter, who's 5, just thinks that's what moms do. And I mean, it's profound, right? And you think fewer than 100 women have ever been to space still in history. 10% of them are Virgin Galactic produced after today. And that's that matters. And the messages that I've been receiving are, from women that appreciate that type of representation. And it's not just women, of course, it's everyone, it's students, it's, it's everything. But I just feel like that is such an important, moment to recognize, because it is a profound difference, and it's very inspiring to see how much can change in just one generation. And then I think about Delta's future, and I'm just, imagining the stars and the moon for her.
So I think we're going to have to bring it to a close, but I mean, just to end with, we've got an incredible audience here with us in the room, but as you both know, you have people watching from your broader teams elsewhere that are tuned in right now. So, is there anything you want to say to them specifically, and then anything that you haven't said already? Please share that before we close.
Yeah, Palantir, if you want a really cool out-of-office message, send me an email today. Thank you for all the support and the ability to take a space sabbatical. I'm so grateful. I have never worked with a more mission-driven group of people than you. And to IIAS, I will not use colorful language, but we did it. And I'm so excited, and I can't wait to cheer on our next flyers.
Yeah. Well, I'll say to the people from the Southwest Research Institute that are listening, I'm looking forward to filing the most unusual business expense travel. Nice. But I also want to say, now the doors are open, thanks to the vision of the executive leadership over 2 generations, because we started this with a handshake in 2009 that we would get in this line of work with our own money, get ahead of whatever federal agencies were doing, and really be at the forefront. And as you know, it took a long time to bring these systems online, and there were some twists and turns along the way, and our executive management stuck with it all the way through, and that's a credit to the leadership of Southwest and to the board of directors as well. So thanks for sticking with it. We finally reached the promised land.
One more question.
Let me just, one really quick, kind of leading question for you, Alan, but I heard you had a guest with you on your flight.
You mean the Roadrunner? Yeah, I flew a company mascot, a little tiny model of a Roadrunner, which is our company mascot. The firm is based in San Antonio, Texas. Roadrunners are pretty common around there. Our company magazine's called the Roadrunner. Nice. And I even found out though while I was here that it's the state bird of New Mexico, which made it doubly significant. So I flew a little tiny model of it on a necklace basically, so that it could be flown. And thanks for asking about it.
Nice.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I think that brings us to a close. Thank you to you both.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Lots more to come, I know. And thank you everyone again for joining us and for the press that have joined us here today.